to be the first to offer my unreserved congratulations on your glorious ascension up the slippery hierarchy that is the Mage's Guild. Now that you have achieved the rank of Evoker, you can have access to the Guild Library. I can remember when I was first deemed worthy of such an honor, my eyes did not leave printed page for 3 whole days. My advice is to take advantage of this as soon as possible. Once again, jolly good show, Manoja-ko. Oh, how exciting! Yes, this one did come here to talk about training, and Manoja-ko should do her studies that she had planned first. But then I am going to the library, and I'm going to read and read and read until my eyes fall out. But for now, yes, train this one in restoration, please. You and the trainer practice for 3 hours. The trainer tells you to reflect on what you've learned and see if you can put it to good use. And now to the library. Library, books. There's so many books. Trubarenzia, King Edward, Fall of the Usurper, Brief History of the Empire. There's so many to choose from. That's part 3. This one would not start in the middle of a series. Oh, Galerion the Mystic, he founded the Mage's Guild, right? Galerion the Mystic. During the early bloody years of the Second Era, Vanus Galerion was born under the name Tractus, a serf on the estate of a minor nobleman, Lord Gernassa of Llugwych on Caer. Tractus's father and mother were common labourers, but his father had secretly, against the law of Lord Gernassa, taught himself and then Tractus to read. Lord Gernassa had been advised that literate serfs were an abomination of nature, and dangerous to themselves and their lords, and had closed all bookstores within Llugwych on Caer. All booksellers, poets, and teachers were forbidden, except within Gernassa's keep. Nevertheless, a small-scale smuggling operation kept a number of books and scrolls in circulation, right under Gernassa's shadow. Yes, as they should. A world without books, that's no way to live. When Tractus was 8, the smugglers were found and imprisoned. Some said that Tractus's mother, an ignorant and religious woman fearful of her husband, was the betrayer of the smugglers, but there were other rumors as well. The trial of the smugglers was non-existent and the punishment swift. The body of Tractus's father was kept hanging for weeks during the hottest summer Llugwych on Caer had seen in centuries. 3 months later, Tractus ran away from Lord Gernassa's estate. He made it as far as Eleanor, halfway across Somerset Isle. A band of troubadours found him nearly dead, curled up in a ditch by the side of the road, nursed him to health, and employed him as an errand boy in return for food and shelter. One of the troubadours, a soothsayer named Heliant, began testing Tractus's mind and found the boy, though shy, to be preternaturally intelligent and sophisticated given his circumstances. Heliant recognized in the boy a commonality, for Heliant had been trained on the Isle of Artaeum as a mystic. When the troupe was performing in the village of Potenza on the far eastern end of Somerset, Heliant took Tractus, then a boy of 11, to the Isle of Artaeum. The Magister of the Isle, Iachesis, recognized the potential in Tractus and took him on as a pupil, giving him the name Vanus Galerion. Vanus trained his mind on the Isle of Artaeum as well as his body. Thus was the first Archmagister of the Mages Guild trained. From the Llugwychs of the Isle of Artaeum, he received his training. From his childhood of want and injustice, he received his philosophy of sharing knowledge. This one has enjoyed her time with the Mages Guild so far, so I suppose I owe Venice Galerion my thanks. So many books to choose from. Oh, this is a recent thing. The War of Betony. The ghost Manoja-ko is supposed to be investigating. King Lysander's died in the War of Betony. So this one should read this. Could there be a better proof of the natural perversity of Bretons than their conduct before, during, and after what history will remember as the War of Betony? By the most depraved of motivations, the most despicable of tactics, and the most ungentlemanly of triumphs, the Kingdom of Daggerfall changed the nature of warfare in the Iliac Bay and perhaps over all of Tamriel. In Sentinel, we call the recent carnage the Siege of Betony, but as the book of history is writ by the victors, let us speak instead of the War of Betony. This seems like a rather biased source, but Manoja-ko shall read it anyway. It is not exactly greatest, not exactly the greatest scientific research when one lets one's own personal feelings and opinions cloud matters. There's too much anger in this, but Manoja-ko will learn of the anger behind this, perhaps. Redguards, by their nature, are a modest and practical people. We are not phlegmatic like the High Elves, nor cowardly like the Wood Elves and Khajiit. This one does not take kindly to this. This is a very rude book. But what would infuriate and enrage the swaggering, vainglorious Nords and Bretons would not merit a shrug from a Redguard. Had any Breton kingdom possessed the little island of Betony, it would have been covetously guarded. Betony's trade would have been seriously restricted, its religion subjugated, its people bound by active and constant pledges and duties of vassalage. But Betony was not a Breton dominion. Betony was part of the Kingdom of Sentinel. This one keeps tripping over Breton and Betony. Yeah. King Lysandus, may the Old Ones continue to torment his soul for his wickedness, saw the prosperous island, which is closer to his land than to Sentinel, and his black heart turned to avarice. Through threats, lies, acts of piracy, and finally invasion, Daggerfall illegally took possession of the island of Betony. His court sorceress, the Lady Medora, his enchantress mother, and other experienced counselors were horrified by the brutality of his campaign and begged him to abandon his tyrannical act of war. Gradually, all dissenters were removed from court. None but the ignorant and the warmongers remained. Our late King Cameron tried to employ civil diplomacy with Daggerfall, but in the end, he made the former declaration of war. Daggerfall and Sentinel have fought many times in their 2,000 years of coexistence, and Cameron knew the black magic and espionage of the Bretons considered honest warfare, never debasing the Sentinel character by duplicating Breton villainy. Cameron knew best how to combat Lysandus. King Lysandus's knavish battle tactics were even more perfidious than his ancestors, and the war continued to rage until it began to involve more than Daggerfall and Sentinel and Daggerfall. Lord Graddock, ruler of Reichsgrad Keep, acted as conciliator between Sentinel and Daggerfall, and eventually convinced both monarchs to meet and make peace. The ill-fated Treaty of Grad Keep began civilly. The terms of peace were discussed, agreed on, and set to paper. The terms were excessively generous. Cameron had agreed to give up some of his rights to Betony in order to placate the madness of Lysandas and bring peace back to the Iliac Bay. It was not until King Cameron read the treaty he was about to sign that he realized the outrageous perfidy of the Bretons. The treaty had actually been purposefully miswritten by the Daggerfall scribe in a desperate and ignominious attempt to trick Cameron into signing a contract different from the one to which he had agreed. The castle of Reichsgrad Keep erupted into bloodbath, and the war continued. The Battle of Cringane Field was the most tragic ending of the senseless war of attrition. The Cringane Field is located between the Yorthborland and the Ravinian Forest, where the armies of Sentinel and Daggerfall respectively made camp after the massacre at Reichsgrad Keep. As the battle began, Daggerfall proved that she had some foul Daedric magical tricks left by blinding the Red Guard army with a wall of mist. Lysandas did not have opportunity to gloat over his cozenges for long. For the sure arm of a Sentinel archer struck him in the throat, even through the thick swirling fog. Lysandas' son Gothrid, who had spent the battle in lugubrious relaxation, was crowned without ceremony, and thereupon demanded a duel with King Cameron. Cameron was many years Gothrid's senior, and though a superior warrior, was exhausted from the endless warfare the boy king had been spared. Nevertheless, as a point of honor, our king agreed to the duel. The new king of Daggerfall, by dirty trick and black magic, managed to backstab our king before the duel ever began. Thus, the victor of Cringane Field and the War of Betony was Daggerfall. Daggerfall's wickedness continued even after her inglorious victory. While the Widow Queen of Sentinel, Her Majesty Akarithi, mourned and tried to mend her shattered lands, Gothrid demanded the Princess of Sentinel as a hostage of war. To save her homeland, Princess Aupki agreed to leave Sentinel and even marry the murderer of her father. But we true Red Guards of Sentinel know where her love and honor lies. The Queen of Daggerfall is the Princess of Sentinel first and foremost. This is an interesting account. Clearly biased. But even so, there is something to be learned from it. It seems there is much bitterness between Daggerfall and Sentinel. Oh, this is a different one. A different account by a different author. Perhaps that will provide a more rounded view. The history of the Iliac Bay, if told in its entirety, would horrify readers more than the most gruesome legend of the Underking. In comparison to the wars of the First and Second Era, our most recent appeal to arms, the War of Betony, pales. The Siege of Orsinium lasted from First Era 950 until 1E980 without a pause. 1,000 years later, the Thracian Plague, coupled with the War of Righteousness, slayed over half the population of the Iliac Bay. Should that not be slew? And yet, the War of Betony fascinates us, and not just because of its immediacy. Ironically, Lord Mogreth of Betony was seeking peace when he asked for Daggerfall's protection on the island of Betony. The island had long been independent, but as the piracy in the bay increased, Mogreth have truly realized Betony's vulnerability. King Lysander's agreed to be Betony's liege, on advice of many, including his archpriest of Kinnera, Lord Vanak. While Betony is a prosperous fishing island and well placed strategically, the vassalage of Betony was primarily an act of charity. Lysander knew that if someone did not help Betony, it would fall to the pirates, if not to someone worse. Unfortunately, King Cameron of Sentinel did not agree, citing a 200-year-old contract obliquely if not illegally written to suggest that Betony was a traditional holding of the Kingdom of Sentinel. Cameron declared war. The majority of his advisors, being warlords in a traditionally bellicose country, supported their king in this. The chief counselor, a woman called the Oracle, foresaw death and defeat in the war, but her wisdom was stifled and she was banished from court. Cameron should have listened to her. A few scrimmages of the War of Betony went to Sentinel, but the major battles were all won by Daggerfall. King Lysandus, his heir Prince Gothred, and the general army of Lord Bridwell, the general of the army, Lord Bridwell, were fine leaders and warriors as well, and the Battle of the Bluffs and Siege of Craghold both went to Daggerfall. The war might have been won with one more victory, but for an unusual domestic incident at King Lysandus' court. The king's mother, the Dowager Queen Nulfaga, had been uneasy about the war since its beginning, but she now began to have visions of cataclysm. She saw the death of her beloved son, should the war continue. Ebullient by his success, King Lysandus refused to listen to her fears until Nulfaga left court. Lysandus then realized how certain she was about his impending death. He began to actively negotiate a peace treaty with Sentinel, using the neutral lordship of Reichsgrad Keep as a facilitator. The Treaty of Reichsgrad Keep was never to be. King Cameron was initially civil, as the losing side of a war is often civil, but when he realized that the proposed treaty would have included a formal declaration that the kingdoms of Sentinel and Daggerfall would share Betony, he flew into a rage. With no thought for the protocol of attacking a neutral, peaceable lordship, Cameron ordered his army to riot through Reichsgrad Keep. First, the halls of the palace, and then the streets of the capital ran red with blood. It was only with the support of the Daggerfall army that the chaos was brought under relative control. The Sentinel army fled to the Yorkborough land, and the Daggerfall army chased them as far as the Ravinian forest before making camp. 1 week later, after each had a chance to send for reinforcements and plan their strategies, the armies met in the field that separated them, the flowering meadowland called Cringane Field. In the heat of the clash, an unnatural fog spread over the field, blinding all combatants. When the mist finally lifted, King Lysandus' body was found, his throat pierced by an unmarked arrow. Daggerfall did not waste any time in mourning. young Prince Gothrid, who had shown great bravery in battle and was very popular among the troops, was crowned King of Daggerfall just behind the battle lines, and he ordered the army onwards. Perhaps it was the sight of the brave young warrior turned king, appearing on the battlefield in full regalia, that inspired the Daggerfall army. Perhaps the battle would have turned regardless. Sentinel began to panic. King Gothrid met King Cameron before the Red Guards had retreated, and the two monarchs fought. Both were excellent warriors, but Gothrid was a more skillful swordsman, and Cameron fell that day. Lord Oresme of Sentinel formally surrendered to Daggerfall, giving up all rights to Betony officially. He later committed suicide on the ship back to Daggerfall. Peace was a difficult process for the cities and towns on both sides of the Iliac Bay. As part of the formal peace treaty, King Gothrid asked for the hand of Princess Llugwych, only daughter of the late King Cameron and Queen Regent Aquarithi. The request was intended to restore friendship between the kingdoms, and it was partially successful, though many in the royal court of Sentinel viewed the princess as more of a prisoner of war than a bond to Sentinel. The only surviving member of the ruling family of Reichgradkeep was a sickly infant, so the councillors of state appealed to Lord Oberon Flight, a cousin of Lord Craddock, to rule the lordship in Regency. Lord Flight accepted, and his strong, almost dictatorial style was just what Reichgradkeep needed to restore order after the bloody Treaty of Reichgradkeep. His subjects were grateful that when the infant heir died, they not only elevated his wife Doriana and him from regents to rulers, they agreed to rename the lordship in his honor. Reichgradkeep became Anticlair, named after his ancestral home. The horrors of the War of Betony still live on, even in Anticlair. Whether King Daggerfall and Sentinel will be able to use the marriage of King Gothrid and Princess Llugwych as a symbol of peace rather than discord is something that only the future may show. 14th of Sun's Dawn, 3rd Era 404. That is about a year ago. Manoja-ko has learned much. Yes. This is all very interesting. Manoja-ko is more interested in reading of magic, but given the task the Emperor has given this one, it is good to know the recent history of the War of Betony, or at least two different, conflicting, and very biased accounts of it.